the notion of being in a classroom, 75-minute periods, 4 days a week with all of those specific structures was very challenging for the student that I have in my mind right now in particular. And he had spent a lot of his time outside of the classroom, which, as if you're not in the classroom, then it makes it more difficult for the learning to take place. And then once he made the transition, he went over and he did like a student for the day inside of our center and got an opportunity that throughout the day tried 4 different trades. And in that moment fell in love with auto mechanics and decided that working with the student, went and registered for it and was supported with the career counselors that we have that were there to make that transition very easy for himself and the family to really know what the program would be all about, the expectations, responsibilities. And one of the biggest pieces that I think that was a real shock was this student had high absenteeism. And over the course of a year and a half of being over in the Nova Career Center, if he missed 1 or 2 days of school, that was it for the entire period of time. Was just really engaged in it, being hands-on, being something that was of interest. Just the modular approach in terms of the learning wasn't overwhelming. A student did so well, ended up with 5 offers for employment afterwards, took 1 offer, and then that company chose to send him back to do the electric vehicle program. And he just recently graduated from that program this past December. When I think
Wow.
about a story like that, it really touches you where this was a student that was missing a lot of school and just couldn't stay in class.
For most school districts, graduation rates remains a top metric of success, and it should, and it's important. But I always had the wondering is, does that mean they're now out of our hands and good luck at that point? And how do we then measure the effect of those 12 years, 13 years on their life success? We never really have done that. Today's conversation with Mike Helm is one of the few districts where I've seen people really dig into, well, what happens after graduation? How do we ensure that we are there for them beyond 18 years? And I know that's not in the mandate of most of our school districts. It's just not what we're set up to do. At the same time, if we really do care about these individuals as humans, we want them to be successful. And is there a way in which we can support them? And Mike's school district, New Frontiers School Board, just outside of Montreal, is really thinking about this. In our conversation, he talks about their student population being up to age 70, which I think is phenomenal, helping adults with disabilities and so forth, and having the capacity to really help people succeed in life. What a powerful mission and effort. So I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. It ties in very nicely with last week's episode with Mike McMahon of Fort Vermilion, just really wanting people to be successful in life. I trust you enjoy my conversation today with Director General of New Frontier School Board, Mike Helm. Mike, great to have you here. And again, I have to thank a mutual friend of ours, Cindy Finn, for pointing me in your direction, saying, hey, you need to talk to Mike Helm, who is in this, I think, unique board, if you will, in many ways, being quite a small board next to a major metropolitan area. So maybe just start a little bit, Mike, telling a little bit about the board, its kind of location, and maybe the challenges that are face a small English board just outside Montreal.
Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you very much, Dean, for reaching out and having me here with you today. It's a real honor to be able to talk with you. In terms of the New Frontier School Board, we are located just across the Mercier Bridge, and our territory comes from that to the Montreal border to the West Island, out near the 20, which brings you to the Ontario border, and then we border down onto the U.S. So our territory is, although it's a larger territory, we are a smaller school board in terms of population. Population has about 4,000 students in the youth sector, and then we have about 1,000 students that are being serviced as an adult learner or in the vocational programs.
And I don't know that other people outside of Quebec really understand that as an English board, you were in the minority, and there are some sort of inherent challenges slash biases that come with that. So maybe just can you share with people a little bit about what that's like in the context of a French speaking province?
Yeah, so that is one of the challenges that exists for the English minority language school boards in the province on a couple of levels. One is that by being in that, we're always in the situation where we're looking at translation for a lot of our stakeholders, for our students, our parents, and within the school board. So we do have to work in French and the documentation that we receive. Information that we do receive, however, that is of the nature, that is of a pedagogical nature, that we do receive in English from the ministry. But one of the things that's extremely important is that dynamic that we do have English speaking families and providing that service to them. What's a little bit unique in terms of what we offer compared to, let's say, our Francophone counterparts, where they're really offering a French program. Most of the school boards in the province, including New Frontiers, is we're offering a bilingual program. So we actually offer a mix of 50-50 in terms of 50% of our courses will be offered in French and then 50% are offered in English so that our families get that true experience of having both languages as they're looking to graduate. And in some cases, some of our school boards have even more offer of French above the 50%.
Mike, when we talked earlier, I think the thing that I was compelled to want to explore more deeply about the New Frontiers School Board is your adult vocation education program, which is, I think, pretty unique. I haven't heard many that talk. You are very free to talk about your students' ages, like 16 to 70, and your focus is not just on helping kids graduate, but after that, like making sure that there's some stepping stones for that, which is not something that most of our educational districts are focused on. So, what is that all about?
Yeah. So again, as I was mentioning earlier, we do service about 1,000 students within our school board. We have three career centers that house our students. But in particular for the vocation, we work very closely with our youth sector in terms of transitioning students that have an interest in a more hands-on work environment. So we work very closely with those students. And then they have an interest potentially in some of the different trades that we offer. We offer 17 different vocational trades within New Frontiers. And then there's others that are offered within the province. And we do work in collaboration with other centers if that's where the interests of the students are, because we want the best for our students. We also offer an SIS program, which is a social integration services program for students with exceptionalities. And we get a range of students in terms of ages. So we have some students that come to us right at the age of 16 to enter in so that they have that continuation. And then we have students that have gone off, gotten into the working world, and then have figured out maybe this would be something that would be of interest. And they come back to us at the ages in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s into our schools. And then, as I was mentioning about the SIS program, there we do have students that the age range there is anywhere from late teens right up into to their 70s in terms of helping and supporting with those students and with those families. And it's quite interesting. The programs themselves, we work with the province in terms of taking a look at where the employment needs are and what services we should be offering in those areas for that employability afterwards into the labor force. And we've been very fortunate within our school board and the region that we're in, the area that we're serving, that following our students graduating through the programs, that we have 100% placement. We have a lot of businesses that work with us, partner with us so that we can provide those stages. And then through that networking and support piece, we're able to have it so that our students, as they're leaving and following their last stages in those programs, can then get employment in those areas if that's the direction that they want to go in, and be staying here within the province or the region or the area.
Can you share any specific success stories of a student or somebody that you look at that has gone through this, and you just look at and say, that's the model of what we were hoping to achieve with people? So maybe a story or two from a success point.
Yeah, we've been fortunate to have a number of students that we found to be that have done great things and have gone on to be success. Where, inside of the high school setting, and as they were going through the youth sector, it just wasn't clicking. It just wasn't working for that student. The notion of being in a classroom, 75-minute periods, 4 days a week with all of those specific structures was very challenging for the student that I have in my mind right now in particular. And he had spent a lot of his time outside of the classroom, which, as if you're not in the classroom, then it makes it more difficult for the learning to take place. And then once he made the transition, he went over and he did like a student for the day inside of our center, and got an opportunity that throughout the day tried 4 different trades. And in that moment fell in love with auto mechanics, and decided, working with the student, um, went and registered for it, and was supported with the career counselors that we have that were there to make that transition very easy for himself and the family to really know what the program would be all about, the expectations, responsibilities. And one of the biggest pieces that I think that was a real shock was this student had high absenteeism. And then over the course of a year and a half of being over in the Nova Career Center, if he missed 1 or 2 days of school, that was it for the entire period of time. Was just really engaged in it, being hands-on, being something that was of interest. Just the modular approach in terms of the learning wasn't overwhelming, but had that support and that, like I say, that get engagement and sense of belonging. Really, that makes a huge difference in terms of a student's life and their success. A student did so well, ended up with 5 offers for employment afterwards, took one offer, and then that company chose to send him back to do the electric vehicle program. And he just recently graduated from that program this past December with that company, who helped and supported him to do that 1 year course in the evenings. So he was working during the day and then completed that during the evenings, where the company actually helped and supported him with that by reducing his work hours, but maintaining the salary so that he could live with family and all of that. So
Oh, that's
when I think
yeah.
about a story like that, it really touches you, where this was a student that was missing a lot of school and just couldn't stay in class.
Well, and reports lately have really emerged that absenteeism is everybody's feeling that. Even whatever we are past COVID, it's still hanging on. And I've heard that from a few other people saying, absenteeism is a problem. And it's there's lots of reasons why, but I think one of the things for sure is that engagement piece, right? And what you talked about is probably a familiar scenario to many kids. It's not doing it for me being in school. But when you create an environment where they're number one, belonging, and number two, finding that purpose in what they're doing, that changes it. And the solution isn't the same for every kid, but I think we all could be doing better to figure out those two components to what student engagement looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate this past week. I was working with system leaders from across Canada, and one of the biggest conversation pieces that we were having was around absenteeism. How do we re-engage our students and get them back into feeling that they belong, they have a place, they have purpose, and that the learning aspect is important. And then how do we work with each of our students in ensuring that what they're missing or what needs to be put into place, whether it be a program, whether it be support networks, whether it be resources, helps them to be able to be, like I say, that re-engaged in their education. Because right now there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of where we're landing and what we're offering, and with the curriculum to get them to the point where they need to be.
When I just want to keep on this adult side of things, because this was always one of the things when I was working in the school district, we would talk about our success in terms of graduation rates. That was always a big metric of, oh, you're graduating 80, 90, whatever percent it was, which is great, but that's just the start of it, right? Because then the idea there is we're done our job. We're passing you off to whether it's post-secondary institutions or careers to be successful. You're not quite done though. Like your philosophy is we're not quite done. Just because a kid is 18 doesn't mean we can wash our hands of that kid. I wonder what other metrics besides graduation rates do you look at in terms to determine your success rates? And I don't know if I'm getting if there's a real answer in there or not, but it's just something I've always been curious about. Because to me, a kid is 30 years old, it would be great for them to say, you know what? One of the reasons I have had success as a 30-year-old is what happened in my K. And I'm not even going to say K-12 because it's a lot more than that for you. But you know what? In that sort of public school experience.
Yeah. So for us, as we take a look actually with our graduation rates actually encompass students through a 7-year cohort. So as we receive them, our students in grade 7, there's typically 5 years of high school. And then there's an opportunity for us if they continue into, let's say, as an adult learner, or they go into a vocational program to get their a diploma in a trade, then those all count towards the graduation rate for a school board or a service center in the province of Quebec. So very much it is in our best interest for our students, supporting our communities, but then also working towards that overall success that we're looking for. We spend a tremendous amount of time. We have youth and adult committees that sit together working with counselors and resources to ensure that we are making sure that our students are aware that they have those opportunities to see what programs are being offered, to make sure that as we see some students that may benefit from going on into our adult education and vocational programs that haven't set necessarily, I am moving on to CEGEP, but they're uncertain, that we make sure that we provide all of that information so that we can work with those students. And we do. So that's one metric that we are looking at, is how many students we successfully transition into our adult programs and then in vocation. And likewise, we take a look at, once we have students and the age categories that they fall under. So if they're in our catchment, in our cohort, or students that have come back to us that are maybe 20, 30 years of age or older, when they come back, how are we doing with the retention of those
Mm,
students? How are we ensuring that now they've come in and their needs are being met so that they can have a positive experience, learn the trade that they're looking for, and then be able to go out back into the working world and be successful in the trade that we have worked on with them. So we measure that retention rate and the supports that we put into to place for that. And in the province of Quebec, we do have overall there's a significantly high retention rate, in particular on the English side. And then for us at New Frontiers, we have one of the highest retention rates in the province in that area.
and to me, that's a very significant metric because those are the people who have said, I choose you, right? A kid that is entered into school, they have no choice. They live in the area and they're coming to your school, whether they, it's not their choice. But when you're 20 years old and you say, no, I want to come back, they're choosing you. And so if they're choosing you, you want to make sure that you are giving them, not that you aren't in other cases, but it's a different scenario because this child is now an adult, matured, made a decision for them. And so you really, I think, first of all, them choosing you in the first place is a significant metric, the fact that they would want that and they see value in what you're offering. But then, like you said, the retention part of that. So, no, I think these are some interesting ways, new ways, I think, where we can measure our success as school districts and schools in general.
Yeah, and I think too, like right now we're in the process as well. We've had a survey that we've been working with in the youth sector for a number of years, and now this past year we've implemented it at the adult side. It's the Tell Them From Me survey, which is now called Our School Survey, and we've implemented it. And we're also going to use that information because in there, that's where the students on the adult side can also let us know how are they feeling in terms of the support they're receiving from staff. How are they feeling in terms of that connectivity to the center, to the program, and really give us some input in terms of maybe some areas that we need to, and some of the anxiety levels that they're
Hmm.
dealing with, because they have a lot of pressures, in particular with some of the students that are older. They're caregivers at home, right? They may have young children, young families, as they're trying to come back and take these vocational programs. And how do we support them so that they can be focused on their learning and then like I say, get back into the job market afterwards with those skills.
This episode is brought to you by Advanced Learning Partnerships, also known as ALP. We are a professional learning consulting group that serves communities across North America. We are partners, designers, and agents for change. You can learn more about the work we do at alplearn.com. And now back to the show.
Indeed. Listen, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk more about you as a leader. One of the things that I noted when we had our call is what prompted you to go into education. And you referenced I believe it was a grade 3 teacher that inspired you way back when. So tell us about that and how that sort of got you on your leadership path for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a grade 3 teacher. It was when I was in my elementary, I had a grade 3 teacher that really inspired me. Was someone that he was, I think it was his always being in a good spirits. He would greet the students, and in some cases, there would always be maybe some little things that were happening, but he always made sure that everyone felt really good about themselves, and would spend so much time, offered up help at any moment to any student to really make sure that they understood whatever it was that we were working on in any of the subject areas. And it just felt like when I thought back to that, and I came home one day and I told my parents, I said, you know what? I'm going to be like Mr. Harris. I'm going to be a teacher. That's what my goal is, because I want to help others. And pretty much from that point on, that was my goal. Was the path that I took was everything gearing towards getting into education and then becoming a teacher, so that I could hopefully try to do what he was doing and providing to students.
What warms my heart about that from another perspective is first of all, having a male teacher in grade 3 when you were a student was probably quite unusual. And that's what I started as a primary teacher. So I taught first grade and all the way up to 6th grade and my teaching tenure. And I know there weren't very many males at that level. And I think that's a powerful impact that a male teacher can make on a young boy at that age. And I think we need more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. In the elementary level in particular, it is definitely, there's not a lot of male educators in that. In a lot of our elementary schools, where we have maybe one, maybe two in some of the schools, but primarily it's a female dominated profession in those early years. When you move on to high school, that you see more
Right.
males coming into the picture. However, in the elementary, I agree. It's anytime that we can get those role models in there, that's fantastic.
Well, and I'm surprised that number hasn't grown. I thought maybe that I was starting a trend that maybe there would be more, but it didn't happen. And in fact, from a lot of numbers, the number of males going into education is actually decreasing, which is not good. So we'll save that for another talk. But I think you and I both understand, and as it does everybody, that's not a great trend. We need to figure out how to fix that trend for
No,
sure. Um,
absolutely.
as you move from classroom teacher into your role now, along the way, always there are leadership challenges that you face and things that maybe have you pause and you look back and say, boy, that was a difficult moment, but I got through it somehow. Can you just share maybe a specific time where you had a leadership challenge and what was happening at the time in your mind and what helped you maybe get through it, or maybe you didn't quite get through it, but you learned a lesson from that?
Yeah, in terms of some of the challenges, I would say that moving from the classroom into the administration, there's this notion that as soon as you cross that doorway, that now everything as an administrator, and I found that to be one of the most difficult pieces was in that first year in administration. That although I got into administration relatively young. I was only 8 years of experience in teaching, and then making the shift into administration into a large high school as a vice principal. But just walking across that doorway and sitting behind that desk, that then there was an expectation that you are going to know everything. How the best approaches in terms of pedagogy, the best approaches in terms of handling students and discipline. And I can remember in particular that I had one department in particular that would ask and have expectations that, in terms of dealing with certain students, that there was a way that it should be handled. And I was very fortunate in my time in my role as a vice principal that I had a great mentor and coach. And I think that is what is crucial for anyone, whether it's in your early years of teaching, whether it's in administration, whether it's at the district or school board level, is to really have those individuals that are around you to be able to support you as you're having to make difficult decisions or have hard conversations with others, and being able to bounce that off of other people. And I think that if there was a piece, and in particular, this was about student discipline and whether or not I was handling it in the most appropriate way or not, having that person to be able to coach me and not necessarily tell me, but to say, okay, what are you thinking? What made you come up with that decision to handle that situation and really go to that higher critical thinking in terms of, and processes in terms of what it will mean if you do X or Y, and spending that time to really develop and grow, as opposed to maybe you did it right, maybe you did it wrong, or you should do it this way. But to have that time, I think that really helped me as an early career administrator. I was very fortunate that to have that person in my life and help me at the school.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that coaching in any profession is a critical thing. And I think there's always been a challenge in education because of whether leadership can be a very lonely position. If you're even if you're a principal and have a vice principal in a school, like you're one of one or one of two, that sometimes, like you've pointed out, you're supposed to know everything, which is unfair and not reasonable. But even as teachers, right? It's an isolated profession, and there's many teachers who experience long periods of. I can remember being a classroom teacher, and you get busy and you go days without really having a real conversation with another adult, and that can become the norm. And then suddenly you realize, boy, I haven't talked to anybody around advice. So I think I love that advice, and I'm around build yourself people that can support you, that can give you feedback, that can coach you. So I think that's something that we have to be so intentional about in education, because I think it's the structure of our profession is such that it can get lost so easy and just doesn't happen unless you're intentional about it.
Exactly. And I think that's it. It's finding that immediate circle of the people that you are interacting with, the people that you're working with on a regular basis. Just make sure that those are people that are guiding you in the right direction. And those are the people that then, as you're going through with that, like I say, with whether it be the mentoring and the coaching, that influence that's having an impact on you is the right influencers that are in that immediate circle. Because when you have the right people, it can really help you and help grow you and make you think and be a stronger leader in the end.
The good news is there are so many great people in education. I'm blessed to know, we mentioned Cindy, and now I'm getting to know you and others. So I have no shortage of people who I think can really support, but you have to work at that. So this leads into my next question, which you may have already prompted yourself for this one a bit, but you can go any direction you want. I would love you to name somebody in education. So it should be somebody that's either actively in education that you are grateful for. And I know there's thousands of people, I hope, that you could mention. So to find one is difficult, but and I'd love it to be somebody who could maybe listen to this podcast and hear their name mentioned and say, oh, that was nice. I'm glad I feel good that Mike mentioned my name. So who'd you give a shout out to that you're grateful for?
Yeah, there has been a number of people that have really helped and shaped and influenced me over the time in my career. But certainly the one that I've had the fortunate of these past number of years to work very closely with and really try to walk in that path and those footsteps would Rob Butters, who was the former director general, just retired from New Frontiers. I had the opportunity to work very closely with Rob for the last 9 years as his assistant director general. And the things that I've learned from Rob, the coaching that he's provided me has been significant. And absolutely, I think that helping me get to a point where I am right now and stepping into his shoes here at the school board, he certainly helped me to get there. And like I say, to grow. Very fortunate. I know Rob, many people throughout Canada know Rob extremely well. And it's always the same. He's there. He'll be there to help you. He'll be there to support you. Just pick up the phone, give him a call. And yeah, that's the kind of person that he is. And it's all about student success and what they.
And I think that speaks to the intention of a school board to have a succession plan, right? The fact that you are speaking highly of him as opposed to other districts where you have to bring in somebody new because, again, lots of circumstances and under which that happens. But when I think about the districts that have homegrown people move along, typically they're the more healthy ones. They're the ones that have some stability in it. And then add to that, I guess, the innovations that we talked about earlier, I think are a real great testament to what school should be, is a real place of belonging and stability, but also looking to the future as to, well, what can we do to make, student success even greater. So just as I wrap up here, I've got some other questions I like to hear just for my own sort of recommendations, if you will. So let's talk about maybe what you're reading or what you're listening to on a professional learning side of things. So can you give me any recommendations of something that you're currently absorbing or have recently read or listened to?
For right now, one of the things that professional development wise that I have been engaged in is looking more into the coaching and having a better grasp on that, and getting myself certified in that field so we can provide more to our administrators, to our staffs. So we've been working with an organization called Allevi, and that's been something that has been very beneficial, as they do have coaching clubs and other aspects within that organization to then engage with other individuals, whether that's here in North America or across the world. So that's been something that is of great interest to me. And then being able to help and work with that within the organization. And then certainly for us in reading and looking into our indigenous cultures and families and helping to support in those areas. Been doing some literature in some of those areas as well, and working with our indigenous advisor to help us, and doing like just some storytelling and having time to sit with him and just listen to what's happening. And that is some of the best professional development that you can get. We've done walking tours in Ganawagi, which is really incredible. I highly recommend to anybody that is in close proximity to an indigenous territory to take advantage of and go and just ask someone to lead them around and tell them stories. Just listen to what is being said and how the stories are passed from one person to the next. And I think that is something that we sometimes lose sight of, that there's a feeling that we always need to maybe pick up a book to learn about something. And in some cases, the best learning, the best opportunities are when we're doing this, like we're doing right now,
Yeah.
just sharing a story and talking.
Interesting. I've had a number of guests on that have referenced either themselves diving more into the indigenous education and building up their own education, and then even some indigenous leaders talking about it. A lot of folks from British Columbia, they've really, I think, in many cases led the way. Until you said that, I think the indigenous experience in Quebec would be even different, simply because you already have the French English side of things that occupy a lot of attention and trying to sort that out. And now the indigenous component in between there is probably a little bit of a unique way in which that works. And so I think that would be a whole other podcast. I'd love to find somebody to delve into that, because I think there's some really interesting dynamics there that I certainly hadn't considered, given the dual language as well. So
Yeah, there's a rich possibility in terms of having some good conversations, in particular with some of the, like you say, some of the indigenous communities here in Quebec, because certainly it is there's challenges just with in and around education, health, and other in their context, but then you add in the complexity
yeah,
of the French aspect and that language and the laws that are currently in place in the province. It adds another level of
I'll bet.
complexity to that world for sure.
And at the same time, what an opportunity. You're trying to embrace all kinds of cultures, as we are everywhere, right? Just trying to honor people and their experiences and who they are, and not in a competitive way, but in a way that serves everybody's needs, but it's not easy. It's not easy. I can imagine. I didn't even consider that as a challenge for you as a leader to try to make sure that everybody's happy and we learn with and from each other. That's, if we do it right, it's an amazing opportunity for sure.
And really, that's what it is. And we're just trying to learn each and every day from their experiences and what we can do to make sure that we are being inclusive and equitable to everyone. And I don't begin to say that I completely understand, no, and really have the sense in terms of what best steps to take forward in terms of making all of that happen. And that's why we spend considerable amount of time trying to have those conversations so that we do have a better understanding. But I can tell you, every time I have those conversations, it's incredible what I learn and what I walk
Yeah.
away with.
Yeah. Excellent. So when you're not trying to be a better coach, when you're not trying to learn about indigenous cultures, lead a school district, all the things you're doing, is there something that you would maybe just to get away when you're sitting down at 8 o'clock at night, you just want to relax and what is there anything you watch streaming wise or something that's just that's my kind of escape to get away? I'm just always curious to know what people do to get away from it all.
I'm a big sports fan, so I do watch a lot of sports, in particular football and rugby and whatnot. During the peak of those seasons, I do get caught up in front of the
I
TV.
noticed you didn't mention hockey, and is that because the
Well,
Canadians aren't really a
they're not
factor at
having a
this
great
point?
season this year, so we're in rebuilding, right? So
Yes.
going young and rebuilding, and
Right, right.
hopefully that just doesn't keep reoccurring for years and years to come. I did this past week being with system educators, took a little bit of heat for Montreal, but that's all good. There's still lots of good atmosphere in that, even when we're not necessarily winning in hockey. Although the fans, we can be a little bit hard on the team, and we shouldn't always be. But no, I also like, for myself, I like being outdoors and doing different things as well. So I think that's another thing, is trying to have some kind of meaningful balance to your life, because it's so easy to get wrapped up and be part of this 7 days a week, engaged
Absolutely.
in all of these aspects that you let the rest of the things that are happening outside of. So spending time with the family, getting outdoors, whether it be hiking, skiing in the winter, doing those types of things is critical too, right? Because yeah, you can get caught up very easily 7 days a week, spending your evenings, emails, reading up on everything centered around work.
Never ends. It never doesn't have to end. Now, so my last question is a bit of a transition from that as well. So I have been to Montreal a number of times, have never probably been in the New Frontier School Board region. So if I were to come and instead of going east towards downtown Montreal, I went south and maybe even a little bit west, what should I give me a place I should visit, something I should see that I might not see if I'm just focused on going to Old Town in Montreal or whatever other common places there are. So what's a highlight of a space in your region?
We'll start out in the valley and I'll work your way towards Montreal. How's that sound?
Sure.
So if you're out in the valley, so down near the US border, and in particular, if you're out into the Franklin, Hemmingford areas, out that way, boast some of the best apple orchards in the province and potentially the country, as well as maple syrup. So there's a lot of maple trees in and around that area. I know Vermont tries to compete a lot in that area, but we do offer a wide variety of specialties in and around some of that. We have wineries and microbreweries that are all growing up into that region and in those areas as well, ice wines and things like that. So there is a whole day or two that you could be spending out in that area and just taking in the hillside, the countryside, and it's a wonderful, great experience. And then as you start to come along and you get into to the Chateauguay area, you're getting into a growing city that has just about anything and everything that you would like to participate in, with activities and offerings within the city. But then as you continue, just before the Mercy Bridge is actually where you hit Ganawagi, which is where our indigenous population is. And I would definitely invite you to go there, take a stop at the tourist resource center, and go on a walking tour. That would definitely be something that I would highly recommend to anyone that's going to be in the area, because what you'll walk away with after your time there will blow your mind quite a bit,
Okay.
terms of the history of where the community was and to where it is today. It's quite a story.
Okay. And I love
I
walking
won't
tours.
spoil the story.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that one because that's something I love to be able to do. Listen, Mike, this was great to have some time with you and learn more about all the things that are happening in New Frontiers and the work you've been doing and your leadership story. Thank you so much for your time today.
Again, thank you very much, Dean. This has been wonderful. And anytime, just give me a call.
Okay. And I hope people do reach out to you with wanting to know more about the things you're doing in New Frontiers, especially around that adult vocation area. I think it's really helpful. So I'll say they can reach out to you.
Excellent. Fantastic.
Okay.
All
Take
right.
care.
Take care. Bye-bye.